Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Higurashi When They Cry. It's your boy Karagol Gaming, and you know how we do things around here. We seemingly wrapped things up last episode, but if the setup is the same as the previous arcs, then we have some end of the game things we can view. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see what happens when we click on continue. We're not done yet, okay. My head was pounding. The sky was bright. It was cold too. It hurt. Each sensation I felt led to a new and different one awakening. When I came to, I was lying face first on a dry riverbed. A few body parts hurt a lot. The skin over a bunch of my joints was torn, turned blue or red or oozing blood. I could tell that it was my bones that were in pain from the agony I felt whenever I moved. I looked up and saw how high the bridge from which I had fallen was. Considering I had dropped from there, it was a miracle that I could open my eyes again. Right next to me was a broken upside-down car seat, which I guessed some pranksters had brought here. Maybe this thing had been conveniently lying right under me, allowing me to escape instant death. Miraculous. Of course, I didn't know whether this miracle was fortunate or unfortunate. I had failed to die, and now I was still stuck in this insane world. How long had I been unconscious for? The sun was high in the sky, so it looked like only 1 or 2 hours had passed. But my body's sluggishness didn't make it feel at all like so short a time had gone by. Mentally, it felt like I had been asleep here for a decade. The more feeling returned to my body, the more the pain flooded in. It hurt so much that it would have been better not to have woken up. I needed to get to a doctor. Yeah, to Coach's clinic. The term Coach's clinic brought back memories one after another, memories I wish I hadn't recalled. Satoko was no longer on the bridge. She would have returned to Hinamizawa by now. And she would put on some clothes, go to the clinic, get a checkup, and report on how crazy I had seemed. The police were waiting for me, no doubt. This time, they would find out for real that I had killed her uncle and arrest me, or they would just send me to a mental institution like I thought they might. Still, I didn't care which it was. Please, someone just stop all this pain. You can boil me or cook me after that, whatever you want. I began to walk unsteadily, just limping along. I went downstream and then through an animal trail-like path in the woods. I walked haphazardly, searching for a path I knew. Eventually, I came across a familiar road and set off toward the clinic. Not to my house, but to the clinic, which had treated me like a lunatic. It was hot and humid. There was no wind, and the air was stagnant. For a while now, I've been smelling the terrible stench of burned eggs, and it made my face scrunch up. No Higurashi or cicadas either. Then at last, I noticed something. I couldn't hear any cicadas. It was the first time I had heard Hinamizawa be so utterly silent. When I thought back, it seemed like birds always chirped in the morning, cicadas always cried loudly in the afternoon, and Higurashi always rose up in chorus in the evening. Always something to hear. I couldn't hear a single insect. The only thing I could hear was the rustling of the wind brushing the treetops. I had never experienced this sort of quiet before. Even the only sound coming from the trees lacked life somehow. The trees were yellow, and many leaves were spread out on the ground despite it being too early for autumn. Even the weeds that had been growing so persistently at the side of the road had yellowed, browned, and lost their vigor. Only the sunlight itself was of the June Hinamizawa I knew, and yet it seemed like the season had switched all of a sudden. Looking at the fallen leaves and rotting weeds led me to spot a few insects turned on their backs. They weren't moving. They were corpses. I looked closer to see insect corpses scattered all around, like a child had collected them as samples and then strewn them about. This stench. What was it? It was terrible, like burned eggs. combined with all the bug corpses and leaves falling from the trees in summer, had someone sprayed herbicides or pesticides around here? Even at school, we apparently fumigate. They call it pest disinfection or something once or twice a year. I hadn't run into anybody despite how bright it was outside. It was mid-afternoon, and yet it felt like I was sauntering about at midnight. Well, with this smell, nobody would want to be walking around outside. Just, what was this anyway? There was no sound, no noise. Not even a breath. Hinamizawa was silent. The school would come into view right after turning this corner, and yet I couldn't hear any commotion at all. None of the shouts or grunts that children always made. It was simply quiet. Just as pretending to ignore that silence had grown intolerable, I saw the school. Hey, what happened going to the clinic? And finally, I heard something. It was the sound of a few trucks. There were a few very tall trucks parked in the schoolyard, idling. About 10 workers in raincoats were unloading things from their trunks. It was hot and humid even in my casual clothing. I couldn't imagine how unbearable it must have been. And then I remembered. Our school was rented from the Forest Service field office, wasn't it? It wasn't strange at all for Forest Service trucks to be doing some kind of work in the schoolyard. Besides, what did forest rangers do anyway? I felt bad for them having to work in such heat and with such a stench about. They were taking colorful cargo out of the truck and lining it up in the schoolyard. They were containers, fairly large ones, inside multicolored patchwork bags. Heavy too. They were being carried in pairs. They lined them up very neatly like tuna at a riverside fish market. Several dozens, hundreds of tuna were completely filling the fairly wide schoolyard up. I forgot my pain for a little while, captivated by this big forest ranger job I had never seen before. As I stood there, watching in a daze, the people in raincoats working on the other side noticed me. One of them pointed me out and they shouted a few things back and forth. I thought they might yell at me for getting in their way, so I decided to leave post-haste. But then, 2 trucks drove up behind me. I stepped aside as they entered the schoolyard. Sheets covered their trunks, but I could tell they were completely full. As they passed, there was an awful smell that made me want to choke. It wasn't the same burned egg smell as before, but an even worse one, like rotten crab meat. What on earth was it? I had been enshrouded in one terrible stench after another all day. So you're telling me they're not noticing you being all ragged like you didn't fall off a fucking bridge? Then certain white letters emblazoned on the side of the passing trucks caught my eye. Ground Self-Defense Forces. What? Self-Defense Forces? Like the army? Why was the army in the schoolyard?
Oi, Kimi. どこから入ってきた?
Suddenly, someone slapped me on the shoulders from behind. I turned around and a canopied SDF jeep was parked there. The SDF person had a green raincoat and a gas mask like the ones in the movies, carrying a compressed air cylinder. He didn't look normal. There wasn't an inch of exposed skin anywhere.
どこから入ってきた?
When I tried to talk, I stretched a wound on my head. It made the SDF people exchange glances. I couldn't see their faces through their masks, but they seemed surprised.
君はHinamizawaの住民か? 住所と名前は言えるか? 一応ここに住んでますけど.
What do you mean you sort of live here, you fucking idiot?
名前は前原圭一です。あ、住所は獅子骨市Hinamizawa村.
After seeing me tell them my name and address without hesitation, one of the SDF people watching from the jeep started talking it into a radio.
本部、応答願います。本部、応答願います。402生存者発見。
What?
繰り返す。402生存者発見。場所は営林署入り口前。
Is everyone else dead? This is base, we copy. Secure the survivor at once. What is his status?
生存者は健在。
Really?
全身に外傷を認められるも、自立歩行可能。これより保護し、本部へ送致します。
I was prepared to go along with the police, but the STF? I couldn't help but think it seemed a little bit too much. They urged me into the back of the Jeep, and then they told me to put on this gigantic gas mask. I did so, and one of the troops fiddled around with it, strapping it tightly to me. It was heavy, hard to see out of, hot, and difficult to breathe. Just looking at the world through the lenses made it lose its sense of reality. My breathing sounded like some giant monster through the mask. At this point, I had no idea what was happening. With much trepidation, I asked the trooper adjusting my mask.
すみません。何かあったんですか？
君はどこにいたんだ？何をしていたんだ？
Hey, don't answer a question with more questions. I was the one asking you,
ず
dog.
っと山に入ったところにある吊り橋から河原で多分気絶してました。今日が何曜日かもよくわからないです。
今日は昭和58年の6月22日。
Wait a minute. A day has passed. Or, yeah, a day has passed because when we were in Satoko's house, there was a can labeled with June 20th, right?
水曜日だ。
That surprised me. Satoko pushed me off the bridge on Tuesday the 21st. That meant I had been asleep on that riverbed for an entire day.
改めて聞きますけど、何があったんですか？なんで自衛隊が来てるんです？何かの訓練ですか？
Had my question been that difficult for him? None of the troopers would answer me. The one in the driver's seat talking on his own radio turned on the vehicles. He turned the dial and some broadcast station or another came in. What? He turned the dial and some broadcast station or another came in. I started to listen to the voice of the radio announcer I was familiar with.
より首相官邸で行われました。記者団からの自衛隊の災害出動が迅速に行われなかったことが前例のない未曾有の大災害に直結したのではないかとの質問に対し、
でありまして、県知事からの派遣要請を受けて迅速に対応したものと思っております。
とこのように述べ、要請を受けてからの自衛隊の出動は迅速であった。むしろ県側の事態把握に遅れがあった可能性を示唆しました。そもそも自衛隊の派遣を要請した県知事は、災害発生から前例のない大災害であることをいつ認識できたのか、そして災害派遣要請までにいわゆるお役所的なロスタイムが生じ、被害の拡大を招いたのではないか、今後の究明が待たれています。
Outbreak.
首相官邸より報道部の尾形記者がお送りしました。さて、ここでもう一度災害発生からの行政の対応を振り返ります。
In the middle of the night between June 21st and June 22nd, a large-scale disaster broke out in Hinamizawa village Shishibone. The details have not yet been investigated, but there was an eruption of volcanic gas from somewhere in the Hinamizawa area. The gas was relatively heavy, and as it spewed out, it began to flow. That flow went down along the small river and headed directly into Hinamizawa village. After a few hours, it had covered the entire region. It happened in the middle of the night. 2 to 4 a.m., every home and household in the village was afflicted. With most of its residents asleep, it is thought that all died without noticing the crisis. The catastrophe striking in the middle of the night caused its detection to come too late. But there was still one small opportunity to have noticed it. 3 a.m., a news dealer's shop in Okinamiya sent a vehicle carrying the morning newspaper to its branch office in Hinamizawa. Usually, the shop would be contacted upon the vehicle's arrival, but this morning, that didn't happen. The news dealer's shop had made repeated calls but got no response. The shopkeeper sent his eldest son to check things out. The shopkeeper sent his eldest son to check up on things, but they lost contact with him as well.
非常に悔やまれています。この時点で警察か消防への連絡があったなら、事態はもっと改善されていた可能性が高いでしょう。少なくとも村全滅という惨劇は免れた可能性があります。
The fire department received the same reports, all from the same confined region. They speculated that a truck loaded with chemicals may have gotten into an accident and reported to the local police. 6:30 a.m. Contact was lost with a patrol car on duty in the Hinamizawa area after the officer reported the smell of rotten eggs. The local police considered the possibility of a large-scale disaster involving the highly lethal gas and reported to the prefecture and prefectural police at 7:15 a.m. 8 a.m. The governor was traveling to nearby prefectures for inspection, so in accordance with regulations, the prefectural environment disaster prevention chief was provisionally escalated to Director General and set up a disaster countermeasures office. However, without contacting the governor, the countermeasures came too late.
近年市民団体によって指摘されていますが、議員待遇者との視察旅行は完全に親睦を目的にしたもので、主演三昧だと噂されています。近い筋の話では、知事は徹夜で飲んだくれて泥酔状態で就寝していたそうです。環境部長から電話があった時も泥酔していて、全く取り合ってもらえなかったのだそうです。
And so, the authorities, in the hour or so it took for the governor to grasp the situation and sober up, did nothing but accumulate information.
知事は言うに及びませんが、知事不在時には本部長を務めることになる環境部長にも怠慢の責任が問われるでしょう。また、県としても大災害を想定したマニュアルが用意されておらず、対応が常に後手に回ってしまったのが致命的でした。
On the advice of the prefectural police, the government requested a disaster relief mission from the SDF. By the time the chemical defense unit equipped with protective equipment arrived on the scene, 8 hours had already passed since the incident's outbreak. Now here's the thing I don't really understand, right? Keiichi was walking around wildly after getting up from the site of the bridge, right? And not once did he notice any of this disaster. At all. That's surprising to me.
とにかく深夜の就寝中というのが不運でした。同じ災害でも日中に起こっていれば全く違ったでしょう。
All the households in the Hinamizawa village region were wiped out. There were over 1,000 victims. The SDF is still confirming the situation on the ground, but their results predicted to only increase that
ス
number.
タジオにはゲストとして火山性の災害にお詳しい地学博士の藤原先生にお越しいただいております。
Obviously.
このような恐ろしい毒ガスが突然湧き出すようなことはあるのでしょうか。
Obviously.
火口部に限定して申し上げれば決して珍しいことではありません。火山大国日本にはたくさんの活火山がありますが、それらの火口部はいずれも危険なガスの噴出する危険性があり、
では今回南沢村を襲った卵のフラン臭のするガスというのも火口部では一般的なガスということですか。
卵のフラン臭という特徴から、おそらく火山ガスの中でも事故例の多い硫化水素によるものだと考えられます。
南沢村は火山の火口部とは全く縁遠い場所にあるわけですが、そういった火口部でない場所にもその硫化水素が発生することがあるのでしょうか。
詳しいことが分かっていないので、まだはっきりとしたことは申し上げられませんが、外国の例で温泉の地下のマグマだまりからガスが噴出したという記録があります。
先生、ありがとうございました。今防衛庁から発表があった模様です。防衛庁の森川さん。
はい、防衛庁です。先ほど防衛庁は南沢村ガス災害の主原因となった火山性ガスについて、陸上自衛隊科学学校での分析の結果、二酸化炭素と硫化水素の混合ガスによるものだったと発表しました。
森川さん、そのガスは依然として噴出を続け、周囲に拡大しているのでしょうか。
現在、南沢村で救助活動に入っている自衛隊第9師団の報告として、ガスの濃度は徐々に薄まりつつある。これ以上の被害の拡大はないと発表しました。
And this gas that spread throughout the village didn't affect me. Is that that's what you're saying?
ですが依然、南沢村地区は危険な状態にあることには変わりなく、今後も
防衛庁から報道部の森川記者がお伝えしました。続きまして、避難を余儀なくされている沖宮地区住民の模様をリポートします。 現在避難所の一つとなっている下篠崎小学校に報道部の現地記者がお伝えいたします。
何ですかそれ。
Inside the jeep, clambering and bouncing along the rough road, none answered my muttered question. An unprecedented catastrophe had destroyed Hinamizawa in a single night? Where was Hinamizawa village anyway? Someplace deep in the mountains, right? Names of places I had heard about on the radio were always like that. They were all places I had never heard of, much less knew the locations of. Wiped out? What does that mean? Don't they usually say how many died and how many were injured? How many people were alive? Where did everyone evacuate to? Eventually, we came into view of Coach's clinic. For the first time, I saw the flag of Japan hanging on a pole outside. Japan's circular sun hung down as though exhausted. Many SDF tents were set up in the clinic's big parking lot, and many strict security vehicles were parked there as well. When they saw the jeep coming, men in white clothing and gas masks came running out of the clinic, frantic and carrying a stretcher.
もう大丈夫だよ。具合は歩けるかい？
歩けます。
And because of my owls, they forced me to lay in the stretcher anyway. People who seemed like doctors were looking at me and notifying others of my condition via radio.
外傷多数、骨折もしくは内臓損傷の可能性大。頭部に大きな裂傷、瞳孔正常。眼底に出血なくも脳内損傷の可能性は否定できず。
Fundus. And then, from the clinic entrance, people lying on stretchers were brought outside to replace me. Judging by their clothing, they were from Hinamizawa, and that's how I knew they were victims. They brought the stretchers in front of a truck. 2 troops, holding shoulders and legs, like some kind of baggage, picked them up and threw them into the trunk. In the trunk of the truck, people's bodies piled in heaps. They were just like baggage, and that told me they were already nothing but shells. At that moment, I remembered all those colorful sacks filling the trunks, and them lined up in the schoolyard like a fish market. Hundreds of empty shells. Corpses. 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 Corpses, motherfucker.
バカ！犠牲者を粗末に扱うな。彼は村の住民だぞ。
Troops carrying the sacks answered with a humble salute. The world didn't need this insane version of Hinamizawa. My final wish. Again, it was granted. I didn't understand anything anymore. None of it mattered. I wished, I cursed, and then it happened the next day. Then please, tomorrow morning, let me die. That insane night, it's still going on. Please, please end it already.
おい、意識が損失したぞ。患者の名前を呼ぶ。早く。
前原くん、聞こえるかい？聞こえるなら瞬きでいいからしてくれ。前原くん、前原くん、前原くん。
Suddenly, the world didn't matter to me anymore. I wasn't interested in their cries.
呼吸が停止したぞ。気道確保。人工呼吸。絶対に生かせ。畜生。畜生。もうこれ以上死者はごめんだぞ。死んでもいい命なんかないんだ。殺すな。殺すな。
I could hear the voice of a man crying and screaming in my ears. Nobody deserves to die. Those words came from his heart. They were so commonplace, and they soaked into my heart too. Maybe it was a mistake to take someone's life, even if it was to save Satoko. If this is the price I had to pay, this horrible tragedy, then this is a little too much, Oyashiro-sama. Why did you never punish me? Come to think of it, Satoko said something. Oyashiro-sama's actual curse never goes for the target at first, but kills everyone they love before that. Oyashiro-sama's curse. It was a convenient excuse I told myself at the very end, that it wasn't my curse that destroyed it, but Oyashiro-sama's. Given that I was in a stretcher, this next bit might have been obvious, but last of all, I realized one thing. Yeah, today, I had not heard those footsteps following me even once. And now, I was liberated. As the cries of the Higurashi I couldn't have been hearing filled my mind. Their tearful ensemble was the only funeral march I had. June 22nd, 1983, early morning. A widespread disaster occurred in Hinamizawa village, Shishibone Prefecture. Volcanic gas, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide erupted from Onigafuchi Swamp, one of Hinamizawa's area's water sources, and spread through the entire village. There were 1,200 victims. 20 have gone missing. The catastrophe was unprecedented, forcing local governments to evacuate approximately 600,000 people. According to later investigations, magma pools and hot springs were uncovered directly under Onigafuchi Swamp, and the gas that gushed from it was determined to be the cause of the disaster. In addition, directly after the incident broke out, many came forth claiming this disaster was a curse based in Hinamizawa village legends, first sparking a wave of chaos. There were apparently local legends of a curse spreading a miasma, destroying the village, and some scholars believe a similar gas disaster may have happened in the past and remained part of these legends. More extreme periodicals suggested this was an extension of the string of freak death incidents that had been happening in recent years in Hinamizawa village, stirring interest in theories about this curse of Oyashiro-sama. In addition, relatives of those in Hinamizawa village who had escaped the disaster complained of sickness afterwards and were hospitalized. Some of them even died of unknown causes, further encouraging such extreme opinions. On top of that, several relatives professing to be possessed by Oyashiro-sama's curse committed suicide in strange ways. And the impact of the disaster has had on the entire nation can no longer be ignored. Wild visions of terrible toxic gas sneaking around in the middle of the night, killing people, spilled across the country, causing a steady stream of people complaining of insomnia, difficulty breathing, headache, dizziness, etc. Some who identified themselves as being obsessed by it began doing odd things. Most of these were mistakenly attributed by the tabloid press. But afterward, some even began to call the mental issues arising from the Hinamizawa tragedy as the Hinamizawa syndrome. The Hinamizawa village region, the object of all kinds of rumors and speculation, is currently closed off, and even flying overhead is prohibited. The prohibition was at one point undone as a result of a decrease in the gas's density, but that autumn another gas burst was confirmed, leading the area to be cordoned off again. Word is that the area is sound asleep, all traces of its former life intact, and left to rot. Only one survivor remains, Keiichi Maibara, age, who lived at Hinamizawa village. At the time of the rescue, he had trouble breathing due to fluid buildup in his lungs, but as a result of life-saving procedures, he was kept alive. He is currently in a general hospital somewhere in the prefecture. The press have been asking for him for quite some time, but all interviews are being refused. What did he see in Hinamizawa? What happened between June 21st and June 22nd in Hinamizawa village? Today, he remains silent, unwilling to speak of it. Oh, shit. Okay. Went missing. They didn't find Satoko's body. Not Teppei's either. Shion committed suicide. Interesting. Very, very interesting. I could not see the events happening in this one, and I feel even more lost. It's like the little disclaimer at the beginning said you weren't gonna be able to make any conjectures. I have no idea what's in store for us the next arc, but I'm curious. Next arc will be the 4th one, if I'm not mistaken, so that will mark the halfway mark. But it's good to see more connections made to the previous arc, so it's not completely random. Very interesting. This arc had a lot more internal monologue, and this arc worked my voice a lot more. I feel exhausted. An elderly couple living in Osaka Prefecture discovered a cassette tape while organizing the possessions of their son, who had passed away 8 years ago. Their son went missing when his fishing boat capsized in 1995. He was 47 at the time of his death. 8 years later, in 2003, they began to organize their son's remains in order to organize their minds, and came across the cassette tape in question. From 1975 to 1989, the deceased had experience working as a journalist for a photographical periodical, and this tape is thought to have been created during that time. The label on the tape read 28th of November 1983, Keiichi Maibara. It is thought that the tape was recorded during an interview with Keiichi Maibara, the only survivor of the Great Hinamizawa disaster that occurred in June of 1983. As the only person who lived through the disaster on the night of June 21st, shrouded in mystery, many interested parties attempted to question him, but he never once spoke physically to anyone in a public place. Therefore, the tape caused quite a stir, possibly being of extremely high value. Click.
なんだか録音されてると思うとすごく喋りにくいですね。
気にしない気にしない。ほら、こうすれば録音してるのも気にならないでしょ。
After this, the sound quality dramatically decreases. Did he cover the recording device with something?
じゃあ始めるね。まず最初の質問から。ケイチ君はあの大災害の夜どこに？
神社から裏に抜けてずっと林道を進んで吊り橋があるんですよ。山に入る少し前にそこから落ちて気を失ってました。
それは大災害の夜、つまり21日から
いいえ、21日の火曜日の朝です。それで次の日の昼間に目を覚ましたわけですから。
どうしてそんなところに？誰もが持つ疑問だけど、当日は平日で、しかも落ちた橋は君の家と学校からは大きく離れているよね。ざっくばらんに言って、君が大災害の発生を事前に知っていて、村から逃げる途中に吊り橋から落ちたんじゃないかっていう声もあるんだけど。
冗談じゃないです。勝手なことを言わないでください。
私も随分ひどい言い分だと思うよ。気を悪くしないでね。さて、次に圭一君が落ちたという吊り橋なんだけど、神社の裏から林道を抜けて至る吊り橋というのは。
多分、俺もあんまり行かないところなので。
そんなに行かないところに、どうして平日の朝に行ったのか、疑問は尽きないけどな。
Never the fuck mind that. How about that?
それで、この君が気絶していたという河原なんだけど、実は
ありえない。また、ありえないですか。まだ。
For a little while, Keiichi Maibara mutters the word impossible several times.
どうしてありえないと？
火山ガスが発生したのは鬼ヶ淵という沼なのは知ってるよね。それで学者の先生が緻密な模型を使ってシミュレーションをしたら例の火山ガスってのは空気よりも重いらしくて地形に沿って低いところへ流れ込む水みたいな性質があるんだってさ。それで
発生源の鬼ヶ淵沼からそういうガスが噴出し、どれくらいの時間をかけて村を覆うのか実験がされたんだ。そしたらさ、君が気絶していたという河原、流れ込むんだよ、ガスが。
よく言ってる意味がわからないんですが。
つまり、君が本当にこの河原で気絶していたなら、君は丸一晩、猛毒の火山ガスの中にいたことになるんだよ。だからつまり、君がここで気絶をしていた可能性は否定されたわけさ。もっとざっくばらんに言うよ。私はね、君が嘘をついているんじゃないかなって思うんだ。君は大災害の時、安全なところに身を潜めていて、ガスが薄れた頃合いを見計らって村に現れて自衛隊の人に保護された。どうかな？図星かな？
For a short time, the journalist presses Keiichi Maibara further in a teasing way, but all that can be heard are heavy sighs.
別に。仮にそうだったとしても。
驚かないとはどういう意味だい？
あんたもさっき言いましたよね。ありえないって。あのひなみ沢では。ありえないことなんていくらでも起こるんです。死んだはずの人が生きてる。そんなこと、珍しいことじゃないんですよ。まさか俺自身が死んだはずなのに生きているってやつを立証しようとはね。
The journalist and Keiichi Maibara both laugh for a while.
じゃあ、ケイチ君、話を変えるよ。
To verify its authenticity, I had the others in the Maibara family check the tapes with his voice in it. However, the sound was not clear, and much time had passed, so the relatives I checked with couldn't remember what he sounded like. I was unable to gain positive proof that it was actually his voice.
あの大災害が、Hinamizawa連続開始事件の5年目のたたりではないかという話についてはどう思う？
I don't give a fuck about the debate.
いや、それはないですね。5年目のたたりは俺ですから。
え？何のこと？
何のことって、あんたの話に対する答えですよ。あの大災害は、まあ、言っても信じないでしょうけど、俺が起こしたんです。俺がね、こんな村、丸ごと死んじまえって願ったから。
そりゃ、豪快な話だね。
豪快？そういう面白い言い方もあるんですね。
I better end this interview before he wishes death on you.
高野さんも俺が殺したし、監督も大石も俺が殺した。
This guy, his snitching is on a whole other level. After Maibara Keiichi's failed suicide attempt on a certain August day 2 months after the disaster, he was diagnosed with a mental disorder and transported to a treatment facility.
あの時の俺にはね、何か神がかり的な力が宿ってたんですよ。そう。例えるなら、
足音ってなんだいそれ。
Why are you giggling like a little bitch? You think I'm saying something funny, bitch?
あんた、足音を聞いたこともないんですか？ペタペタ、ひたひた。あんたも今日からは歩いてるとき、不意に立ち止まってみると面白いですよ。
The facility never allowed any news coverage, so it's extremely unlikely that a tape from the media dated after August 1983 would have his voice on it.
自分がちゃんと立ち止まったにもかかわらず、気をつけた方がいいですよ。
そうだね。気をつけるようにするよ。
そんなに俺、面白いこと話してますか？あんた、さっきからヘラヘラと笑ってばかりですね。
However, the reporter had been criticized for his forceful methods of collecting data while he was active, So there is still a possibility that he broke into the facility and forced Keiichi Maibara to talk.
監督と同じだ。俺のことを同情したり、話を聞いたりしてるふりをしながら、その実、人のことを異常者扱いしてる目だ。
You're already dead, bro.
そんなことはないよ。
いや、俺にはわかるんです。あんたの目は監督と同じだ。あの日以来、もう足音は聞こえない。
Is this truly Keiichi Maibara's voice? The authenticity of this recording is still wrapped in mystery.
だから俺にはもう、あんな恐ろしい力は残ってないだろうけど、今ここでもう一度、あんたの死を願ってみるよ。俺に不愉快な話ばかりをする。あ、そうだな。今回は一つ、高野さんは焼け死にだったから。じゃああんたは逆に水だ。水に溺れて死ぬってのはどうだい？絶好調だった当時の俺なら、次の朝までには必ず死んでる。
15 years after this tape was created, the reporter, just as Keiichi Maibara had predicted, died in an accident out on the sea.
さてあんたは、何日後に水で死ぬかな？あんたも気をつけろよ。俺ごときにたたり殺されるな。
The recording ends in the middle of Keiichi Maibara's laughter. And Keiichi Maibara, late on the night of 30th of November, 2 days after the interview, he suddenly died of a fever. What? What did he say?
足音がまた一つ余計に。
That's it? Now we're done. How about we get that summary now, maybe? Do you think we will have that? Yes, sir. There it is. Let's see what they have to say.
Higurashiの泣く頃に水、たたり殺しを最後までお楽しみいただき、誠にありがとうございました。
I didn't really enjoy it. I don't really fuck with child abuse, motherfuckers.
これまでのシナリオとは少し違う雰囲気でお送りしましたが、いかがだったでしょうか。お楽しみいただけたなら幸いです。
今回も胸のすくようなバッドエンドだったわね。私個人としては大災害が実際に起こった時の惨劇の描写も欲しかったところだけど、
そんなわけありませんでしたよ。またしても大バッドエンド。
We barely even saw me on this whole arc.
あれれ、バッドエンドって割にはみーちゃんは楽しそうだね。
っていうか、もう笑うしかないってのが本音でしょうね。
なははは。毎回嫌な割り方がエスカレートすると思ったら、とうとうここまで行き着いちゃったわけですからね。
みんな仲良しで死んじゃったのですよ。仲良しなのです。ニパー。
そういう見方もあるのかな。毎回死んでる僕はもうごめんだな。たまには死なずにエンドを迎えたいね。
富武さんって時報みたいな役割なんですよね。富武さんが死んだら、あ、後半戦突入だみたいな。
さて、ではここで今回の会合に改めてご参加いただく皆さんです。拍手でお迎えください。まずは監督こと入江京介さん。
ご紹介に預かりまして光栄。どうもどうも。脇役だったわけですが、トータルで見てみるとかなり美味しい役だったなぁなんて思ってます。
本当ですわね。脇役にしては出番もセリフも多すぎで、しかもキャラが強すぎましたよ。
今後どれだけ出番があるかは分かりませんが、その説は応援よろしく。
ありがとうございました。では次に我らが担任知恵留美子先生。
皆さんどうもこんにちは。いろいろと登場シーンもあったのですが、今回カレー勝負で目立つシーンをいただきまして、カレーをバカにする人は許せません。
It's cool. It's cool. We rectified that. Don't worry. That's suspicious.
誰もバカになんてしていませんよ。
Very fucking suspicious is that.
あ、知恵先生に席を空けてあげてください。
さて、これでとりあえず全員レナ、また乾杯をよろしくね。
では皆さん、各卓のコップをお持ちになってください。お飲み物はいろいろありますよ。
What kind of cult-like Kool-Aid shit is this?
本当にお疲れ様会も賑やかになりましたね。今何人ぐらいいるんです？
私たちを加えて多分10人くらいはいると思います。
未成年人と成年人の人数比がこれでやっと互角かな。これで胸を張ってアルコールが飲めるね。
ビールってなんで冷えてるとあんなに美味しいのに、ぬるくなるとあんなにまずくなるのかしら。七不思議の一つよね。
なんででしょうね。
さあビールを継ぎますよ。12345あれ、大人は6人でしたっけ？
僕も泡麦茶がいいのです。リカちゃんもお酒はダメ。
ではレナさん、そろそろお願いします。はいはい、皆さんご清聴ですわよ。
では皆さん、日暮らしの泣く頃に水たたり殺し乾杯。
せーの、
乾杯。
Yay!
さて、では毎回恒例の今回のシナリオ議論でもやってみますかね。
とは言ったものの、今回のシナリオもケムに巻かれっぱなし。意見のある方は挙手をお願いしますね。
お、みんな慎重。挙手ないね。
じゃあ私が先陣を切ろうかしら。申し訳ないんだけど、音楽を変えてもらってもいいかしら。もう少しミステリアスな感じの。ああ、これがいいわね。
ムードが出まくりなのです。では高野さん、お願いします。
多分ね、たたり殺しのシナリオだけを吟味しても謎は解けないんじゃないかと思うの。
Makes sense.
そりゃ同感だね。
I think her scene with Keiichi, the one where she drove him back to his house on the night of the festival, will make more sense in the upcoming chapters as well. I think that's a piece of the puzzle we just can't uncover just yet.
ここまで物語が重なれば、そういう仕掛けがあることは明白だしね。
そんな仕掛けありましたかしら。 これが正しい例かはわからないけど、鬼隠しで前原くんが大石さんとレストランで食事をして、それが園崎さんに知られていて不思議だったってくだりがありますよね。
鬼隠しだけだと実に不思議な出来事ですけど、綿流しを読めば別に不思議でも何でもないことがわかります。
劇中の私が入ったレストランは園崎系列の店だったということですね。園崎一族はこの辺りの飲食店やら何やらを経営しているわけですから。
で、ケイちゃんの顔を知る者があの店にいて、それを私に伝えたと考えれば比較的筋は通るでしょ。そういうことだね。
日暮の物語は微細に異なる場所もありますけど、大筋の設定においては多分4つのシナリオは共通。例えばキャラクター設定。
鬼隠しのレナは怖い人だけど、それは鬼隠しだけの設定ということじゃなくて、レナはレナで4つのシナリオに全く変わらない設定で出演しているということですね。
全く変わらない設定というのは同感。僕がどのシナリオでも常に同じ場所で同じ死に方をするのはその最たるものだね。
どんな物語になっても必ず同じ日に死にますですよ。
綿流し編でお祭りの最中に高野さんと富武さんが西宮殿に忍び込むというシーンがありますけど、あのシーンも他のシナリオでは描かれなかっただけで起こったことになってるのかもしれませんね。
なっているそうです。綿流し当日のお天気や部活の内容、聡子のおじさんの帰宅など、いくつかのイベントを除けばほとんどが共通するそうです。
Was Satoko's uncle coming home in every single chapter up to this point?
だとすると新しい疑問がいくつか湧きますね。全く同じ環境で語られる物語なのに、なぜああも違う物語に派生するのか。
The one being possessed by the demon is different.
一般的なサスペンスアドベンチャーの視点で考えると、物語が派生する分岐点が存在したってことになりますね。
綿流しで言うと、お姉に人形を渡した、あるいは渡さなかったというあたり。あんな序盤の選択肢1個でバッド確定とは恐ろしい選択肢だね。
ではたたり殺しに話を戻しますと、この場合ですとおじを殺そうと決意するあたりですかしら。
私はずっとそれ以前、同居人の女性がトラブルで失踪しておじがHinamizawaに帰ってくることになったあたりからもう分岐しちゃってると思う。
では一番最初の鬼隠しの分岐はどこなのですか？
やはり劇中の私が登場してお社様のたたりに関する連続開始事件のことを話すあたりからだと思いますね。
今思ったんですけれど、ちゃんと圭一さんがミオンさんの気持ちを理解して、それで大石さんも私のおじさんも現れなかったら何も起こらずに平和に過ごせるってことなんじゃありませんの？
へえ。
Oh, wait. In Onikakushi, that wasn't the case. Things started getting a little bit weird when we met Tomitake-san at the construction site, or where Rena was trying to dig out that statue. That's where Keiichi started getting suspicious and curious.
聡子にしちゃ本質ズバリじゃないのよ。確かに言えて
る。じゃあこの暗い物語は大石さんとおじさんが現れないことを祈り、園崎さんのご機嫌を損ねないようにすればみんな幸せになれるということなのかしら。
イエーイ、お姉バッドエンド要因。みんな気をつけてね。お姉の機嫌を損ねるとバッドエンド確定ですよ。何よそれ。 シオ
Now you got the bad ending. Congrats.
あんたには次は容赦なく痛い目見させてやるからね。泣いた謝ったって許してやるもんか。
Interesting wording.
待てこ
これまでの物語の謎は全然解けないけど、どうやったらこの物語が大団円で終わるかのグッドエンドの推理はできちゃいましたね。
本当にそれで幸せになれるんでしょうか。大石さんと北条哲平さんの不登場、ミヨンさんのお人形の件。
It's interesting that her uncle didn't get a sprite
本当にそれさえ気をつければいいんですかね。
or a portrait.
そうそう、みんなは一つ大きな最後を忘れてるよ。南沢大災害という天才を忘れたかい？
天才は防ぎようがないですわよ。村のみんなにガスマスクを配って引っ越しでもしますの？あれはきっとお社様のたたりなのです。だからお社様を怒らせないようにしなければならないのですよ。
Impossible.
なははは、ややこしい話になってきましたね。つまりお社様も怒らせてはダメと。
I think that event serves as a timer. Like, we have to solve this case before that day because unless we solve it, that outcome is going to kill everyone.
お社様を怒らせないためにはどうすればいいのでしたっけ？
ダムの計画そのものがきっとダメなんでしょうね。ダム計画がそもそもなければよかったんじゃないでしょうか。
それは難しいわよね。だとしたらお怒りになったお社様を鎮める儀式が必要ね。
鬼ヶ淵の沼に捧げ物を鎮めるあの儀式ですね。
捧げ物って何をお社様に捧げるって言うんですか？
そりゃあ決まってるでしょう。どんな分岐にも関係なく話の流れから脱落が確定している人だよ。どうせ死ぬならhinamizawa沢のための人柱になってもらわなくちゃね。
Sorry, dude.
その脱落が確定している人ってやっぱり僕のことかな。
やっぱり二郎さんはこの物語に欠かせない重要な役割の人だと信じてたわ。お役目を立派に果たしてちょうだいね。
これで今度こそグッドエンドの大団円シナリオの青写真ができましたね。せっかくだからちょっとやってみましょうか。役者は全員揃ってることですしね。
First, we stop Uncle Hojo, whose lover ran out on him from returning to Hinamizawa.
いやー、私が北条おじですよ。はいはーい。行き場をなくしてロンリーブルー。早くhinamizawaに帰って里子ちゃんをお持ち帰りしてじっくり教育ではhinamizawaにバイクで帰りますか。キーを入れてカチッとカチッ。
成敗、怪人に着せでございますわよ。さとこちゃん、火薬の量多すぎじゃないかな。
I hope Coach is alright, Sweat. Next, we stop Oishi from showing up.
今度は私ですか。私の名前はクラウド大石。ジャジーでブルースな感じがだいぶイケてるナイスミドルです。
What the fuck blew up then? His car! You didn't have to kill the motherfucker.
成敗なのです。
そして忘れちゃいけないのがお姉へのアフターフォロー。ささお姉、可愛らしいお人形さんですよ。よかったでちゅね。なんだか納得いかない。
で最後にお社様の怒りを鎮めなくちゃならないと。
では最後のお役目よろしくね。
踏んじばってすまきにして吊るして。
I'm sorry, what?
3日かけて沈めるんでしたっけ？
面倒くさいですからここは一気にいっちゃいましょう。
ガボガボガボガボガボ。
これにて一件落着。
突然レナの腕が光ってうなって大変なことに。獅子類類で大変なことになってますのです。あれ、電話だ。もしもし。あ、ケイチくん、お疲れ様です。
おうおう、相変わらず大盛り上がりみたいじゃねえか。こっちは次回の台本読みで相変わらず忙しいってのに。まあいいや、今日の俺は機嫌がいいから嫌味はなしにしてやるぜ。シオンはいるか？もう行っちまってもいいんじゃないか？あれ
今ここで発表しちゃうんですか？とはいえもうすでに分かってる人たちもいるでしょうけど、まあいいか。
シオンさんとケイイチさんの二人っきりの秘密ですって？何よそれ。聞いてない。
Okay, Kei-chan, let's say it at the same time. 1, 2, 3. Huh. Okay.
まあつまりはそういうことです。初登場以来ダントツの人気ナンバーワン。姉妹キャラでも遅れ登場した片割れの方が絶対に人気が出るってのはギャルゲー全盛時代から決められたお約束です。
わけわかんねえことはどうでもいいよ。
I have no idea what TH means either.
とにかく俺はそのシナリオでは主人公のお役ごめん。風の噂じゃ俺のボイスを超えてるとか。てっへん、俺の苦労を
まあケイちゃんのボイス数は異常ですから他のシナリオに入れるようになればすぐに逆転されるでしょうけど、まあ園崎姉妹の実力ってやつをとくと皆さんにお見せして差し上げますよ。
でもいいんですの、シオンさん。主人公は毎回ろくでもない最後を迎えると決まってましたよ。
まあこれまではね。でもね、次回からは必ずしもそうはならないんですよね。
日暮の泣く頃に睡も今回のたたり殺しと外伝の染め写しで一区切り。ミステリアスな謎を次々と提示してきた出題編はここで折り返しになり、
Yes?
次の章からはこれまでの謎に挑み、そしてさらなるドラマの幕開けとなります。
Well, I'll be the judge of that.
つまり私が名探偵になって理不尽な謎をバスバス解決していく痛快ストーリーなわけです。今のうちから決め台詞を考えておかないとね。あなたを犯人ですみたいな。
You need to work on those.
納得いかない。
御三家の秘密に近づきすぎて閉じ込められていたぶられて悲惨な最後を遂げる役に決まってる。お姉こそ私に全ての謎と秘密をカンパされて謝罪の言葉を口にしながら自害なされる心の準備は OK です。
Jesus Christ.
お社様のたたりの可能性はなしなのですか？さて、そのしーちゃんが主役の目明かしに進むためには新しい警察資料が必要です。
Completely ignored there, Rika-chan.
初めからを選んでゲームを開始すると主人公にシオンが追加されているので、それを選んで進めてください。鬼隠し、綿流し、そしてたたり殺し、この3つのシナリオを重ね透かして皆さんにはどんな真実が見えてくるでしょうか。推理はまとまるどころかますます煙に巻かれていくだけ。レナも全然わからないです。
For all of you warriors who never yielded to these 3 mysteries and kept on fighting, We present to you one final scenario as thanks for your enthusiasm, one which we originally never planned on giving to you. Please enjoy it. And that's it. That's it. We will be back shortly when we start Arc 4, which apparently sees Shion take the center stage. But we'll see when. We'll see when. I like to get these edited together so I can drop them daily. So it might take a little while. Recording them is one ordeal, but editing them is another ordeal altogether. But rest assured, we will get to it. Hope you guys enjoyed this arc as much as you guys enjoyed the previous 2 arcs, because the 4th arc is on its way. With that said, I'm out of here, man. Love y'all. Deuces.